communication and professionalism. In this, our final video for the A+ 2006 exam objectives, we talk about communication and professionalism. This appears several places throughout the exams, and so we want to make sure that we address this well because CompTIA has never had this on an exam before, and now they do address it in their exam objectives. The first thing we'll start off with is just a sample of a recorded telephone support call, a tech support call, and we'll see some things that might have gone wrong with that. And then we'll compare it against various types of communication that can take place, and we'll see the best ways to communicate with our customers and a way to act professional as well. Then when we have learned some of these things, we'll go back to another technical support call where we'll listen again to see how the conversation could have been handled a little bit differently. And then finally, just to blow off some steam here, I'm going to show you a couple of websites that you can go to for a little comedy relief if you're frustrated as a technical support technician. Alright, before we get started here, let's just listen to a technical support phone call and see how well this technician performs.
AccuSource Computer Consulting.
Yes, is this the computer consultant?
Yeah, this is AccuSource Computer Consulting, lady. That's who you called.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't hear you.
Card state the nature of your emergency.
Well, I can't get my email.
Yeah, okay. Well, what you need to do here then is just go ahead and access Microsoft Outlook. So just go ahead and click on Start, and then click on All Programs, and then go to Microsoft Office, and there should be an icon there for Microsoft Office Outlook.
Well, by start, do you mean the power button?
No. Don't touch the power button, lady. If you do that, you'll turn off your computer. I can't really help you if there's just a black screen up there. So just click on, use your mouse. You know where the mouse is, right?
Okay, start. I click
Yeah, and then you just click on Start. It should be down in the lower left part of your screen for most people. So just click on that, and then just click on All Programs, and then go to Microsoft Office, and then click on Microsoft Outlook.
What is this Microsoft Outlook thing you keep
That's what
talking
you use to check your email. That is what you use to check your email, isn't it?
Okay, I don't know.
Well, what do you usually use? What do you usually do?
Usually I go on the internet.
Oh, so you use a web browser to check your email? Great. Well, you could have told me that in the first place, lady. I mean, how am I supposed to know how to help you if you don't help me help you? You know, I mean, come on. You got to tell me what program you're using here. Okay? So we need to get you on the internet, apparently. So what you need to do is to at least make sure you can get on the internet. So let's click on Start and then click on Run, and then type in CMD and press Enter. You hear me?
Okay. Well, after Start, what do I click?
Click on Run.
Okay.
See where it says Run down there? Should be pretty obvious.
All right. Okay, I see that.
Then you can type in CMD and press Enter.
Where do I type that in?
Yeah, you just type it in right where it says Open. You just type in CMD and click OK, all right? It's not that hard. Okay, anybody can do this. All right?
Are you saying
I do it all the time.
Are you saying I'm stupid?
A little bit. No, not at all, lady.
Excuse me?
Yeah, no, you're not at all.
I need to call the Geek Squad.
Yeah, I think maybe you do. Bye.
Well, what you just heard there was, of course, a staged technical support telephone call that was a little exaggerated for emphasis, but I think that you get the point. There were a lot of heinous errors committed on the part of that technical support person, played by me, and we can see that there were several things that they needed to get right that they certainly did not get right. First of all, the communication skills were horrible, and this is a large part of it. Number one, I should have been clear, concise, and direct in that phone call, and I failed primarily in the clear portion right at the beginning when that person called. I just kind of answered the phone like, I guess just technical support. Well, who in the world knows what I just said? I just mumbled the company that I worked for. I also did not give my name, and that's another thing that you should do in technical support and in customer service of any kind, is to provide your name. That's for a couple of reasons. Number one, it does establish some interpersonal communication or interpersonal relationship between you and that customer. I am somebody with a name. I have the ability to talk to you as another person. And number two, there is a level of accountability that goes with that. I mean, hopefully if I do an outstanding job, you're going to call my boss and say, hey, you know, or ask to speak with my supervisor and say, hey, this guy did an outstanding job. Just want to thank you for hiring this guy, for keeping him on, and I hope you give him a $3 an hour raise. Or it could also go accountability in the other direction where someone wants to talk to your supervisor because maybe you were a little rude or something like that. And I don't mean you specifically. I mean just whoever the technical support person is. So we need to make sure that we're very clear, concise, and direct when we talk to people. And I'm thinking primarily at this point over the phone as opposed to in person. But most of these things will still apply, regardless of how you interface with the customer. And the fact that they are a customer is another very important thing here. It used to be that back in the old days that people with technical mindset and training could often afford to be rude to people, and they would just treat them like idiots. And I mean, 15, 20 years ago, because they were probably the only person in the building that knew anything about this technical stuff that could really get things done. And if you didn't like the way I did it, well, that's just tough. Go figure it out yourself. Well, now those tables have turned, and technical support people are really in the customer support business, and this is going to be a lot like the customer service that you're going to have in retail environments or when you call any kind of a call center for anything, whether it's your bank, your credit card company, the phone company, whoever it is. A lot of the training that those people get for customer service is the same kind of training that we also need to either have or know on our own as well, or learn. Because now the people are our customers and we depend upon them for a living. And if we don't do a good job, well, we might not have a living. So the other thing there is to listen to the customer and try to avoid interrupting that customer. Now, I'll just be honest with you. In real life, I'm not as bad as this as I was when I was in my youth. But I used to really have a struggle with interrupting people right in mid-sentence and jumping to conclusions and assuming that I knew what they were talking about. Well, I think I'm a lot better than that now that I'm in my 40s and I've had a time to learn a little bit. What I'm trying to say is that, 17 or 18 years of marriage have taught me better. So it's very important to listen to the customer and to avoid interrupting. In fact, some people have said, I think there's a saying out there that says you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you speak. And there's also a verse from the good book that says, be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And I'll tell you this as well, in technical support environments, it can be very difficult to avoid anger or frustration because a lot of times it's easy to feed that back to the customer since that's what they're giving you. They're already mad because their computer won't work, and then they call you. And it's very easy to respond in kind. Another thing we should do is to clarify the customer statements. In that phone call that we listened to there, she said that she was unable to access her email. Well, I didn't really clarify much about that. I didn't ask her how she accessed her email. I didn't ask what she used to get to her email. I just assumed that she was using Outlook or maybe Outlook Express or something like that, whatever. I just assumed that there was a program involved. So when I came to the point where I realized it wasn't really an email program, but that she was accessing it through a web browser, then I got all defensive and frustrated. Well, that could have been curtailed right from the beginning if I would have clarified what she was talking about when she said that she could not access her email. And another way to discuss this, by the way, is just to get feedback. You want to make sure that you restate what the customer says to confirm that you do understand what they've said. And this does 2 things. Number 1, it goes a long ways towards helping you solve the problem so that you can make sure you're working on the right problem and that you're not trying to fix their Outlook when in reality they just no longer have their Internet Explorer icon. And secondarily, it helps to confirm to the customer that you are listening and you're interested in what their problem is and you do really have an interest in helping them to resolve the issue. Also, we should try to avoid jargon. I mean, jargon can be very localized, especially if it's some kind of slang. Not all parts of a given country use the same slang terms throughout the country. In fact, you might even be providing technical support for somebody on a different continent or who doesn't even speak English as their native language. And if that's the case, you're going to make things even more difficult to understand if you start using slang. Plus, slang can be generational. I mean, my kids came home from school the other day and they said that somebody was talking smack about somebody else. Talking smack, how do you do that? I mean, my idea of smack is when you hit somebody across the face or something like that. Smack some sense into somebody. So how do you talk smack? I didn't quite get that. Well, it became clear in context eventually that they were talking about somebody was, I guess, insulting somebody else or something like that. So in that case, at least, it was a generational gap. Me in my aged years of 44 couldn't understand what my teenage kids who were so hip and with it were trying to say. But of course, obviously, we want to avoid things like slang. Also try to avoid abbreviations or acronyms. I mean, in that technical support call that I did just a moment ago, I could have used a lot of that. I could have said, hey lady, maybe your SMTP settings aren't configured properly. And do you know what your POP3 settings are? I mean, after all, you got to make sure those are right. And not only that, but if you don't have TCP/IP configured properly, then you're going to have some problems making a network connection. And if you don't have your network card installed in your PCMCIA slot, think of where that's going to go. You see, this could go all different directions, and I could confuse someone about 6 different ways before I even finish one sentence. Now, as you would expect, we should be expected to behave in a professional manner. And everybody has enough self-respect to think that they are behaving that way. However, we can always probably improve on something. And a lot of times people will not realize that they're being unprofessional because they haven't taken a hard look at how they're behaving. So sometimes this might require a little bit of an analysis of how you've treated a customer, or a little bit of analysis on how you might sound to people. You might sometimes say something that could be potentially offensive, for example, or argumentative, and not realize it at the time. So certainly this is something that we need to look back on in retrospect a lot of times and think about how we've behaved. And this would especially be the case if you've had a difficult customer or a difficult customer service issue. Now, one of the other things you'll want to consider there, though, is the issue of privacy. I mean, there's so much right now on personal computers that could be compromising or embarrassing to somebody. For example, people live their whole lives on their systems right now, so a lot of times their finances are there, their family pictures are there. Sometimes they may have home movies on there, or they may have pictures or movies that would be considered highly inappropriate in the workplace, and they're definitely intended to be private. So we have to be careful about what kinds of things are there, and if we expect to be able to see some of those things as we try to fix the computer. I mean, if they're having a graphics problem, then we might accidentally see one of those photographs, or we might see something that would be otherwise potentially embarrassing, and I think you know what I'm saying. Now at this point, and I'm just going off the outline here. I'm going away from the outline and the CompTIA A+ objectives. If you see something or think that you will see something that would be offensive to you, in my view, you have the right to refuse to work on that computer if it requires that you would have to look at that material. And at the very least, if you suspect that there's a problem going to occur because of this, you should contact your supervisor and ask them what to do or to state your objection. And maybe there'll be another technician in your department that's willing to look at it. You know, Sweaty Freddy or somebody like that. Confidentiality is another big issue there. This is where we have the expectation that we are going to see something that is not intended for us directly or for other people to know about. So for example, if you're working on corporate computers and you're working with somebody's email, and then you see when you fix it, the first email that pops up there says that the company is going to get purchased by a competitor, or there's going to be a takeover or something like that. That's confidential information. You should not make that known, especially if it's a publicly traded company. Same kind of thing would apply to medical records if you're working on something that would contain that, maybe at an insurance agency or something. And there's all kinds of federal regulations for this as well. Sarbanes-Oxley for financials, and then there's also HIPAA requirements for health providers and so forth. So we're already bound by certain legal requirements for confidentiality. But even beyond that, just a matter of common sense in not divulging anything that you see on that user's computer. Likewise, in a home environment, you might fix somebody's computer where they're having trouble with their financial package. Well, when you first open it, it's going to probably go back to, once you fixed it, probably going to go back to whatever the last file was that was opened. And if that shows their checkbook balance and that's a little embarrassing, then you would not want to point that out or say, oh, hey, you know what, I was overdrawn last month too. So you don't want to do that and embarrass somebody. Now, there's also the issue of behavior that appears on the CompTIA A+ exam objective. Let me point this out, too. There's nothing really specific about behavior that's put on there. It just says that we should use job-related professional behavior. So that doesn't really cover all of the different things that could be included there because it's kind of a general statement. But I do think that one thing we should keep in mind is that whether you are personally politically correct or not, that in the workplace we should generally tend to be politically correct because it's going to help to avoid different kinds of trouble, and it kind of neutralizes potentially volatile situations in the workplace. And by this I mean doing things such as not using demeaning terms or sexist terms. For example, on that phone call that I just had, hopefully I didn't offend anybody there, but it was in some ways deliberately meant to be that way because I kept calling the person lady. Hey lady, you just do this. Lady, the only thing I didn't do was say, hey little lady. That would have been even worse. But we don't want to use those kinds of terms or anything that could be potentially construed as demeaning. Even if you don't mean it that way in your own personal motive, we have to look carefully at the way we speak to people and the way that we behave in front of them. And again, being politically correct, whether you believe in that or not, but being politically correct in the workplace will help to neutralize any of those kind of potentially volatile situations. And then here's something that I put on there myself. This is not really an A+ exam objective, but I think it is something that I've seen as a problem in certain locations. A lot of times computer technicians are kind of independent thinkers, and as a result that's reflected in what we wear as well. Now, you may have a corporate environment where you already have a dress code, and this might not really apply to you. You just have to follow whatever your company says. However, especially if you go into people's homes or if you go into other locations, then your appearance can have a factor on whether or not you're perceived as a professional. This does not mean that I think you need to go out and buy a $1,000 Armani suit. That's not really the issue there. But once again, in terms of appearance, it would probably be better to err on the side of caution and not to wear something that is extremely outlandish or something that could be controversial or that might offend the people that you go to visit. Now, yes, I know you have the freedom of speech and to express yourself and everything like that, but the freedom of speech does not mean that everyone has to be forced to listen. We just want to make sure that we're there as customer service people, and our job is to serve them, not to offend them or to put them on edge or anything like that. And part of this also, and this also goes back to the typical, and forgive me if I'm typifying too much, but to the typical geek kind of an appearance. Now, I've been a geek for a long time, so believe me, I know what that is. And the typical geek there is someone with unkempt hair and pizza stains on their t-shirt. You don't want to show up to work like that or to someone's home like that. So generally speaking, just try to be neat, clean, and tidy. And also, you usually can't go wrong if you dress in a business casual type of dress code. And for guys, especially if you wear collared shirts, and for all of us if we appear modest and so forth. So then there's also an issue of just a positive attitude and tone. Now that's very easy to lose very, very quickly when you're dealing with difficult customers. And this is something that's really going to come from within. It's not if you read enough books that you'll suddenly become positive. I mean, certainly there are self-help books and things like that, I guess. But really this comes from within, and it also involves a great deal of discipline at times and personal control. Because especially if you're dealing with someone who's already frustrated, otherwise they wouldn't be calling you, or they're already mad, or they're already disgruntled with your company, then it's going to be more difficult to maintain that positive attitude and tone. One thing that I've found out that does help, however, is if someone calls and they're very upset about something, is if I do not raise my voice. I mean, if they're already mad and they're shouting at you, if you start to raise your voice back, then you start to sound argumentative and defensive. Well, we want to avoid those things as well. So one thing I'll sometimes do is if it gets to be a tough situation, is I'll just start to slow down what I'm saying, and then I'll soften my voice, and I'll also try to say everything that I can with a smile on my face, and that kind of has an inward effect as well when you do that. And as far as A+ exam technicians are concerned, this is something that is really easy to fail at. Well, it's easier to argue and be defensive than it is to take the higher road, so to speak, with that. And in terms of something like arguing, what we're trying to do, and this is part of troubleshooting, we're trying to prove that we have a solution. That's the whole point of troubleshooting. And so when we're trying to do that, we're basically trying to prove that we're right in a lot of respects, and we're headed in a certain direction that we think is the right way to go. Now this gets more difficult if a customer calls you who also has technical skills, and you don't want to get into a situation there where you argue or you're defensive with them, because sometimes they might be experts in a specific area that might eclipse your own knowledge. It's just that you have a knowledge of a specific product that they're having to deal with. So it's very easy to get defensive in these kinds of situations as well. And then another thing you want to make sure you avoid is to not minimize that person's problem. That's why when someone calls and tells me that they're having experiencing a problem with something, I say, oh yeah, I can see how that would be frustrating. or something like that. Lend them a little bit of sympathy. Let them know that you're feeling their pain a little bit, and that you would also be frustrated if you were in their same situation. And I've also found that even when you're in the midst of fixing their problem, I try not to ever say, oh, that's no big deal. We can fix that quite easily. Because that makes them feel like, well, if it was no big deal, then I wouldn't be calling you. That must mean that I'm really stupid if it's so easy to fix, and yet I can't do it. And by the way, that's probably something else I should mention. You don't ever want to make people feel dumb. I mean, let's face it, and this could probably be categorized here under behavior. You don't want to make them feel dumb. They probably already feel dumb because they couldn't figure out the problem. That's why they're calling you. And in doing so, it's almost a confession of, I could not figure this out. So we don't want to make situations worse or to treat them in such a way that makes them feel dumber or more dumb. So it's just something that we want to make sure that we don't do to insult them. And this was something that I did wrong in that phone call where I think she was trying to access the start menu and I said, it's right down there, down the lower left of your screen. You know, it's kind of like using a tone of, how could you possibly miss it? It's right in front of you, you know. So we should not probably use that type of a tone or those types of words. And this takes place throughout the conversation, even to the conclusion, when we finally come to a resolution, so that if we were able to fix this person's email problem, for example, then what we would not want to do is to tell them what they did wrong in certain terms. We wouldn't say, you shouldn't have done that, or you shouldn't do this. Instead, we should put it in a positive phrase, and we say something like, next time, go ahead and use this icon. This one will directly access your email for you. So you see how the tone is different, and the way that sounds is different, and the way that makes a person feel is also going to be different and better, hopefully. And then continuing on with the professional behavior we need to use, make sure that we don't exercise judgment, again, on people's intelligence, or that we don't exercise judgment about their morals or about their language or anything like that. Now, once again, if the customer is extremely irate with you and you in good conscience have done everything you can to resolve the situation and to be as kind as possible, and they're using foul language or obscenities or something like that, once again, in most places, and you'll check with your company on this, you do reserve the right to terminate the call politely as possible or to call a supervisor. Normally, we're not supposed to be subjected to foul language and things like this. But again, check with your company on that. And likewise, of course, it should work both ways. We should not use bad words with our users either. Also, try to avoid anything that's insulting or any kind of a name that you shouldn't call that person, like I kept calling my customer, hey lady. The other thing that would be an example there would be to say, okay pal, now here's what we need to do, or come on buddy, or some of those types of names, or hey dude. So we don't want to use those kinds of things. Not that even hey dude is sliding to somebody or demeaning, but it just doesn't sound professional. And then we also want to avoid distractions. I'll tell you what, this is one of my big peeves, is when I'm in line and I've been waiting in line to talk to somebody at a counter or something like that for 20 minutes. Finally, it's my turn, and I start to talk to that person, and the phone rings. And they pick up the phone, and they service that customer for the next 10 minutes instead of me, who's already been waiting in line for the past 20 minutes. I think more companies should have a rule against that, so that if someone does call in, yeah, they can pick up the phone, but they'll say, hey, I'm sorry, someone's in front of me. I've got customers right now, but I'd be glad to take your number and call you back, or may I put you on hold until I'm done with my current customer? Words to that effect. So those are distractions that certainly I know are one of my big gripes, and I'm sure perhaps yours as well. Other distractions that I find frustrating, and I know you do as well, is when I'm dealing with customer service or even in a store or something like that, and somebody else comes up to them, another coworker usually, and says, so hey, are you going to go to that party tonight? And then they turn around and start talking to that person. Well, I was going to go, but my car's broken down. I think Jeff is going to give me a ride, but then he said that his car's already too full, so then I'm thinking I'm going to ask Sandy if they'll give me a ride. It just goes on, and people have these personal conversations. They turn away from the customer, and they're not really servicing you. Avoid those kinds of distractions. Other kinds of distractions would be things that the customer might not even know about, especially if you're on the phone. You're on the phone talking to a customer, and somebody walks by your cubicle and decides to pull a prank or do something that they think is funny or something like that. Well, do your best to ignore that, not to participate in that. And likewise, we should never distract other people who are also on the phone. And even if you find what they're doing, or could find what they're doing funny or entertaining or something, that's not our job right now. And if we get caught up in that or distracted by that, we're likely to lose a critical clue in what the user is telling us, and might go down the wrong path in terms of our troubleshooting. Also, we want to make sure that we respect the property of wherever we are. Although, of course, this would apply when someone brings their computer to you, we also need to especially respect people's property when we go to their home and work on their computer in their own home, or in an office cubicle or something like this. So, for example, if I'm working on the computer and I realize the reason why it's performing so poorly is because it needs to be defragmented, and I go ahead and start to do a defragmentation run on it, it would be unprofessional of me to just pick up their phone extension and dial 9 to get an outside line and talk to my buddy. That would not be professional. Number one, the customer might be right there waiting for me to finish up what I'm doing, and it looks like I'm just socializing on their time while their computer is still not fixed. So that would not be professional. The other thing there, I suppose, as well, would be that if I'm going to defragment their computer, that sometimes can take hours if it's badly defragmented, I would then communicate with the customer, tell them what I'm doing with their computer, and tell them that it's going to take, an hour to finish or whatever it's going to take, and then tell them how to proceed once it's completed and what the benefit to them is going to be. The other thing related to any other kind of office equipment as well, you don't want to just go over there and use the fax machine or the copier. A lot of companies especially are defensive about their copiers because that does cost money to run. In fact, in a lot of places you have to enter in a code to make any copies. But just be careful of their office equipment. And if you absolutely have to use any of the equipment for business purposes, then make sure that you ask the customer first. For example, if you need to order a new part for that user's customer, don't just pick up the phone and call your supervisor. Turn around and ask the customer, say, hey, I need to call my supervisor to see if I can order this part. Is that okay? And then they, I'm sure, will be glad to allow you to use their telephone. Another thing I've seen technicians do wrong in the past is when they're sitting in that office person's cubicle, then they start and they're waiting for something, again, like a defragmentation run, or they're waiting for their boss to call them back to see whether they can get this part, or something else like that. When there's a little bit of a dead time, they might just pick something up, and they might just pick up a picture frame and look at it and say, oh, hey, are these your kids? People feel a little uncomfortable when we start to do that kind of thing and to get a little bit personal about some things at certain times. So just be a little bit careful about that. I'm not going to say you should never, ever look at a picture. I mean, after all, it's there for people to look at. But especially if you start asking about kids or personal or private things, that's one thing. If you see a picture of a cruise ship, then I might say, oh, hey, I went on a cruise to Hawaii a couple of years ago. Where did you go? That wouldn't be so bad. But when you look at a picture of someone's kids and say, hey, what are your kids' names? Ew, a little creepy there. So I think you get the idea with that. Also, if they have any other office trinkets around, if there's a Rubik's Cube on the desk, don't just pick it up and start fiddling around with it and trying to solve the puzzle. That person may have been working for 3 months trying to get that just to the point where it is now, and then you go and mess it up. So don't touch things or move things around or otherwise disturb that person's workplace. At the beginning of our video, we listened to a tech support phone call where we saw that the technical support technician did not do a very good job at all. Well, now we've learned a little bit more about communication and professionalism, so let's go ahead and revisit that phone conversation and see if it could have been handled a little bit better.
AccuSource Computer Consulting, this is James. How can I help you?
Hi, yes, I can't seem to be able to access my email.
Oh, yeah, I know that can be frustrating. Let's try to get that worked out for you. Okay, what I want to do is, first of all, just ask you how you normally access your email. What kind of thing do you click on to access it?
Usually I just click on this thing on my computer and it goes straight to it, and I type in my name and my username and my password, and then there it is.
Okay. Well, that thing that you click on, is that on the start menu, or is it on your desktop, or where is it usually? And what does it look like?
It's usually right there on my screen, and it has a blue E on it.
Oh, yeah. That probably means that you're using Internet Explorer to access your email. So you're not using Outlook Express or something like that, if I'm guessing right. Is that correct?
I don't know Outlook.
Yeah, you're just using the blue E, so it's Internet Explorer. Okay. Let's go ahead and work with that. Click on Start, and then up at the top of the menu there should be one that says Internet or Internet Explorer. Go ahead and click on that.
Okay.
Okay. And then once that opens up, you should see the internet come up, and you should see that now. Is that correct?
All right, yeah.
See that? Great, great. All right, we're headed in the right direction here. Let's do this. Go ahead and go up into the address part of Internet Explorer where you usually type in, what web page you want to go to and things. And go up there, and let's just type in www. And then what does your email address end in? Is it like google.com or hotmail.com or yahoo.com?
Yahoo.com.
Yahoo, okay. So we'll just go, and you'll be entering in www.yahoo.com.
Okay.
And then press enter. Okay. Are you at yahoo.com now?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Now then, up at the top part of that screen there, it should show you something there that says sign in. So you want to make sure that you can do that. And then just go ahead and click on that link.
Okay.
It says sign in. And it's usually close to the upper right. Do you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll click on that link. And then it'll ask for your Yahoo ID and password. You see that dialog box, that screen?
Right.
Okay. So what you'll do is you'll enter in your Yahoo ID, and you know what that is? That's just your email address, so just type that in.
Okay.
And then enter in your password, and then sign in, and then after that you should see your email. Is that working for you?
Yes, there's my email. It's good. Thank you.
Great. I'm glad to hear you got there. All right. Well, once again, my name is James. If you need anything else, feel free to call us. Is there anything else I can help you with today?
No, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
All right, in this phone conversation, I think we improved a little on our communication skills. Now, I'm sure that there's always something that I can improve upon, but clearly it's better than the last conversation that we had. One of the things was there's a lot better clarity, I think, because I was being more clear with the customer, and I was trying to get clear information from the customer as well. Instead of just assuming she used Outlook, I asked her how she normally accessed email. Notice that I did not say initially that, oh, you usually use Internet Explorer, right? I asked her what she clicked on, and she said there was a blue E. Now, there's a really good chance that is Internet Explorer. I could be wrong, but we proceeded with that. And of course, in good troubleshooting scenarios with A-plus technicians, you go until you find out that you're going down the wrong path, or until when you test it, it's not the resolution, then you go back and figure something else out. But we got on the right path with that. And also, we listened a lot better there, or I listened a lot better, and I did not interrupt her right in the middle of a sentence, or cut her off, or not allow her to really express what the problem was. I also clarified customer statements. So, for example, she said she clicked on something with an E. So I asked her, and we didn't really know this initially, but I asked her if that was Internet Explorer, and I also asked her if she was able to follow along every place where I was. I didn't say click on start, then click on run, then type in CMD, then type ipconfig /all. I didn't do anything like that. I stayed with her through every step of things and clarified whether she was there, and also tried to make it clear that anything that she would say to me was something that I was understand properly as well. And I don't think I used any jargon except that I said, I think we can clear that up, or some words to that effect. That was probably a little bit colloquial, but not too bad, I don't think. Also, and these are big ones, in terms of my positive attitude and tone, I think I was a lot less harsh with this person this time around, and I think I had kind of a positive, more of a bright attitude and a brighter tone to my voice, and I was also a little bit more well-spoken and clear. Also, we did not argue or get defensive and minimize the problem or the person. I didn't, pretend that she was dumb or give her the feeling that she was dumb. I gave her the positive sense that we're making headway and that we're headed towards a resolution. And another part of that I was doing there was right at the beginning of the conversation, she said that she couldn't access her email. And I said, oh, yeah, I know that's frustrating. So I identified with her, let her know that I would also feel just as frustrated if I was in her shoes. Now, sometimes, despite your best efforts, the customers are going to get the best of you. Hopefully, you don't take it out on them and you're able to keep the tension out of your voice. But I do want to take you to a couple of websites that will help you to blow off a little bit of steam with this. One of the first ones is a classic with technical support folks. And that one is this website, deadtroll.com. Once you go to their website, just scroll on down here and look for something that says, Welcome to the Internet Help Desk. This is probably the funniest video I've ever seen. It is absolutely hilarious. It's a parody of somebody who's an internet help desk person, and they're trying to help users that in the perspective of this video at least, are not too bright. So if you want to get your frustrations out, just do it at home on your own while you can do so safely and not take it out on the customers. And then the other website I wanted to take you to was this website up here. You can make a note up here of the URL, and this has a list of tech support calls where there's lots of stupidity going on. So once again, you don't want to call the customers stupid. You want to stay professional in the workplace. But if you need to blow off a little bit of steam and look at some experiences that other people have had with tech support, both ways, by the way, because some of the tech support people aren't too bright in this either, then certainly this would be a good place to to blow off some steam with that. In this nugget, we talked about communication and professionalism, and we started off with a technical support call. And let me tell you something about that call, by the way. The customer was none other than my lovely wife. And I'm sure that she would vouch for me in telling you that most of the time when she asks me for help about computers, I don't act like this guy. I can say that because she's not in the room right now. But anyway, we saw some things that go wrong with that kind of a tech support call, and we looked at some communication methods that will help your professionalism to go better. And there are also a lot of things we need to do to conduct ourselves as professionals, and we saw some of those issues also. And then when we take a look at these things, we were then able to take another technical support call and to see how it went a little bit better in light of some of these things that apply to making a good call. And then finally, we concluded with a little comedy relief, a couple of websites that I just showed you that hopefully will help you to blow off a little bit of steam if you ever have a frustrating day with your customers. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.